and we are excited to be a part of the BookTube community, and we are. Should I keep that in?
No.
So if you didn't.
Hold on.
What is wrong? Again, if you're not reading if you're not using Storygraph, like, did I say Storygraph? It does move pretty no.
Good.
I like Clusterman's.
So,
Bring up the story of our.
whatever.
Wait,
The
pause.
face?
I have to pee.
Okay.
Oh, we're there.
Whoops! Great.
He's been dead for a while, so
Sad.
yeah.
Okay. Hello.
Welcome back. How are you?
We are late.
Yeah. We had a few things come up in life, and then school, and then, but we're here today because we're going to wrap up all of the books we read in March. And spoiler alert, I read a lot of books.
I did not.
Well, you'll see it in a minute, but I got a lot of books read this month.
It also seems like it was so long ago.
Yeah.
That I don't even remember some of these books.
So, welcome back to our channel. If you haven't been here before, we are Shelf Possessed.
I am David.
And I'm Craig. And we are a gay couple in the Midwest who love all things books, reviewing books, reading books, talking about books, sharing books. Anything book related, we love it. And we are glad that you are here. If you're here for the first time, click that like button, subscribe, comment below, tell us what you thought of the video, tell us what you thought of our reviews, tell us what you think about these books that we read. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to talk to you more. And if you haven't shared the video with someone, send it along, see what they think. Maybe they can join us. So we'd love to have that. So if you haven't been here before, especially with a wrap-up, we are both teachers. And so we, rather than doing the typical star rating, which is, in our opinion, a little bit like misleading and doesn't really give a lot of information about why that rating is the way it is, we created our very own book report cards. So you'll see those throughout the video, and we'll reveal through 5 different areas how we graded the book. So,
And if you're my student, you know exactly. This makes a lot of sense to you.
Yeah. I will say, when I was doing my report cards this month, I was relatively shocked by how high most of them were. There was only one that was really lower than I thought it would be, but even when I gave it its grade at the end, I was like, that should be lower, right?
Yeah, I think when I was looking back yesterday on the ones that I read, I think only one kind of stood out to me the most. And I was like, oh, well, I remember that experience reading that one.
Yeah.
So
also, you, if you go back to our March TBR, you'll notice when you see David's books that two of them, you read 2 from your actual TBR that you had set, and then you abandoned the rest, and then picked up 2 other ones.
I just abandoned 2.
Yeah, well,
but then 2. I picked up like 5.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you had a lot to choose from, to be fair.
It was a lot. It was a lot to deal with. It was a lot coming at me. A lot of presents thrown at me.
You're welcome.
And then I was like, well, the ones that I had set aside for the TBR, I was like, well, those have to wait because I want to get to these first. So there's a few that I kept on my TBR that I actually got through.
They're still there. You'll still read them. So
we'll see.
Before we get into the book reviews, I read 8 books this month, which I know for most booktubers, that's not it's not an achievement of any sort. But for me, who typically only reads 3 to 4 books a month, at 4 being usually the max, 8 books was like a huge deal. I pushed myself really hard at the end of the month to like add in 2 extra books so I could get to that 8 books. And I did it. And March 31st, like 11:30 p.m., I finished my last book. So we've talked about this before at the end of our videos, but if you haven't, check the links in the description box below. One of those links is that link to my story graph. David doesn't use it yet, but I'm going to get him there someday. And I just want to talk a little bit, and I'll put these on the screen as well so you can see this. I love the Storygraph app because of the reading tracker and the stats page specifically. Like, it will tell you, what your highest read genre is, how many pages you read, how many books you read, what the pace was, what the rating was. Like, it'll give you a lot of stats. So I'm going to kind of go over my stats because I read so much, and I just wanted to share those before we do the reviews. Are you cool with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, as I said, in March, I read 8 books, which, according to Storygraph, was about 2,700 pages, almost 2,800 pages in a month, which I think is great. The biggest, mood that I read were dark and mysterious and reflective. Those were my highest mood ratings, I guess. So that was pretty impressive in and of itself. I read all over as far as pace goes, but usually a medium pace is typically what I go after. The majority of the books, 88% of the books that I read were between 300 and 500 pages. So typically that's kind of where I fell. Nothing really above that. Maybe one, I think, below that. So I read 1 nonfiction and the rest were all fiction. And is anyone surprised? My top 2 genres were horror and thriller. So that's kind of where I landed for the month of March. So again, if you're not using Storygraph, I would use it. It's a really great alternative to Goodreads, which is owned by the company that shall not be named. Goodreads is obviously being used more frequently by more readers, but I think Storygraph is a really great alternative and has a lot of good features, and it's independently owned and run. So we should be supporting those people especially. So the one thing I don't like about Storygraph is that they still do star ratings, which is fine. There's not really a way around that. But I had 1 3-star book, 3 4-star books, 3 4.5-star books, and 1 5-star book, according to Storygraph. So you'll see that in my ratings as well. Do you think I can convince you to use that now?
I don't know. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that too, but in all honesty, when you're done reading a book, you just select the book that you're finished reading it, and then you just do a quick Q&A thing about the review. You can add a text review if you want. I never do, but you definitely can do that. It's just a really good way of seeing what you read. And at the end of the year, when I'm looking back at my list, I'm like, well, that's how I remember all the things that I read. Yeah. So that's the nice part about it. All right, should we get on to the book reviews?
Mm-hmm. You have a lot more, so you should start.
I do. I guess I'll do 2 at a time?
Do 2 at a time. Yeah.
Okay, so the first book that I read in March, which I actually started in February but finished in March, so we're going to count it for March, is Hex. And I enjoyed this book. It took me a while to get through it. It's quite long, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the concept, especially. I enjoyed it less and less as it went on. If that makes sense. When the concept is introduced, I'm like, oh, that's cool. It is about this town in Massachusetts or New York, I can't remember, and they have this hex on them where this witch is all over their town, and she doesn't say anything. Her mouth is stitched up, she doesn't do anything really, but she just appears all over the town in different places. And they have this monitoring and surveillance system that kind of keeps track of her, and they try to keep out outsiders so they don't have to explain this. And once you've been in the town for an extended period of time, you can't leave, and when you do leave, you start to get dark thoughts and things start to take over, and it kind of pulls you back. So the book is mostly about the witch and the town kind of reconciling with that, and then trying to push the boundaries of what they can do to this entity, and then there's obviously repercussions based on that. So I thought the concept was really cool. I didn't love it as it further got on, and I think the ending is fine, but I didn't love it. I like this author. I'm excited to read his new one. I haven't purchased it yet, but I'm excited to read his new one. I really liked him a lot. So my grades for Hex, for plot development and pacing, I gave it a 90 out of 100. It moves pretty fast. Like, it goes pretty fast and a lot happens. For character development, I also gave it a 90 out of 100. I think that the characters in here are really interesting. I don't know that they grow as much as I would like them to grow, but, you know. Theme and subject matter, 95. I like what the book is trying to say. I like, especially, like, you can layer on a lot of meaning to what is happening to this town outside of it just being like a horror supernatural thing. So the writing style is 85 out of 100. This isn't because it's translated, but this was originally published in Dutch, and then the author was given the opportunity to write it in English and shifted some things and changed some things. And there are times where you can feel the translation just a little bit, not a lot, but you can feel it in the writing a little bit, especially when you're talking about someone who's not, from the United States trying to write about the United States. It's like, well, it just feels a little bit clunky in some ways. And then for reader engagement, I gave it an 85 out of 100 because I enjoyed it for the most part. I got less and less engaged as it went through. It took me a while to read it, so that's why that grade's there. The final grade I gave Hex was an 89 out of 100, which is a B+, which I think lines up with my Storygraph rating as well. So that's number 1 for me. Number 2, you saw all these in our TBR, so this isn't a surprise, but my number 2 is Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. A book I was really anticipating and thought I would love. And I didn't hate it by any means. It doesn't have that low of a grade, but it's lost me at multiple points through. Everyone's calling this a horror novel, and I guess you could say it's horror, but it felt more like dystopian thriller, like, I don't know, Hunger Games kind of style, but replace that with, like, a disease that kills everything with testosterone, or makes these people, anybody with testosterone, into this, like, maniac, terrible, like, zombie creature. And there's a lot that this book is saying about, especially, like, the trans experience and what it means to be a trans woman, and I liked that a lot, and I liked what it was trying to say. I just think that there were things about it that didn't work fully, and it was pulpy, which isn't a bad thing either necessarily, but it just wasn't something that I found uber compelling, especially as the book kind of wore on. And then it takes some twists and turns that I didn't expect, but didn't like either. So for plot development and pacing, I gave it an 85 out of 100. It does move pretty fast for the most part, and it's not a long book by any means. But yeah, I don't know. There's just things about it that were odd to me. Character development, I gave it a 90. You end up liking most of the people that you're following, which is great because you clearly want to like the people that you're reading about. Theme and subject matter, again, 90. I think what the author is trying to say is admirable, and I think that this is a really interesting way to do it. I just don't know that it fully panned out or worked for me personally as a reader. Writing style, 90. The writing style is very graphic and very body-centric. Yeah, there's a lot of body horror-ish things that happen. It's not like horror necessarily always, but writing style, I give it a 90 out of 100. I like what they're doing, and I like the way that they write. There's just some graphicness there that I wasn't expecting. And then engagement, I give it a 90 as well. I got through it fast, and I didn't really put it down very frequently. Again, the audiobook really helped me with this one a lot. So that gives it a final score of 89 out of 100, which is a B+ for Manhunt.
I want that cover as art in our restroom.
I mean, I think that at first I was like, well, maybe this cover is just like to, pull people in and like get them to read about it, but it actually does
match the insides.
Yes. Like the cover is actually relevant to what is happening on the inside.
Wouldn't you want that in our...
No, I do not. Nope. I don't think I don't think I'm ever going to read this book again, and I don't think I need to be reminded of what's happening in this book either.
Do you think that I would like it? I like body horror stuff.
Yeah, I think you would like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the only book that I have for this TBR wrap-up that is 100 across the board, and that is The Old Woman with the Knife. We found this on our journey to Bishop and Knobs, and I quickly saw the title of this, and I was like, well, what the heck is that? So then I opened it. A female assassin is getting ready to age out of her business. She has nothing else in her life. This is all that she knows. And she doesn't want to go. She doesn't want to leave. She kind of likes her job. That's all I can really say without giving anything away because there are so many spoilers in here that I haven't had this much fun with a book in a long time, especially with a female protagonist like this one who is invisible by everybody around her, which is why she's a great assassin, because she can be invisible in those spaces, especially in public spaces. And that's how, she's really good at her job. So it was just, I felt very connected to her as a character, and a character that I have never seen before in a book. And she's fucking bad ass. And that the whole journey of this book was just a great one to be on. So for plot development and pacing was 100, character development 100, theme and subject matter 100, writing style 100, and reader engagement, you had me by the throat, 100. So giving this an A+. I think this is going to be in my top 10. I really think this is going to be in my top 10 because I was very surprised and I completely loved this book. And I think I've read, at least this month, I read 2 books that I think are going to be in my top 10 for the year. So, The Old Woman with a Knife.
Do you think I'm going to like it? There's my answer.
I think you would. I think you would. I think it's going to take a while for you to get into it.
Okay.
But I think she's just a very complex and interesting character, and she's not unreliable.
Okay.
So you may like her.
That's good.
But it says a lot about how we treat women of a certain age, and
it's also translated too, right?
And
from
it's
Korean?
translated, yeah. And that didn't bother me at all. That didn't take me out of it. But it's just a very beautifully written story.
Yeah. Well, good.
So yeah. No, I hate not being able to talk about it without spoiling it, because something happens that it's like, oh, so where the main character has to turn around and think about exactly what she's been doing her whole life. Is it good? Is she doing something good, or has she been doing something bad and evil the whole time? So
yeah,
I loved it.
Good. Right. These first 4 or 5 books were the ones you saw on my TBR. You'll see some at the end that I added as we went. So the next one that I read was The 90s by Chuck Klosterman, which was my one nonfiction book. Also surprised that I wanted to read this. I'm not surprised. I'm a kid of the 90s, so that doesn't surprise me. But I don't typically read nonfiction, so this book was great. I read this in 4 hours, 3 hours. I used the audiobook I read it physically while listening to the audiobook. And it was just so well written, so funny. I learned things about the time period that I grew up in that I did not know. There was a lot of talk about music, which I was really appreciative of, and a lot of talk about the rise of the internet and what that meant. And then there were a few chapters about politics, which I was very intrigued by, because there were things in there that I didn't really know. I remember Ross Perot running for president. I don't remember a lot of the details of that, and I don't remember I don't know. I just remember him being a joke at the time, and he really breaks down his run really nicely. The stuff that I didn't care about was the sports stuff. There were 4 chapters about sports, which I was eh. It's interesting, I guess, to read about Michael Jordan and his experience, but I wasn't a sports kid. I'm not a sports man now, so I don't I just didn't really care about that stuff. But for the most part, I thought it was great. And I think I would come back to this again at some point to like reread some stuff, because there probably were footnotes and stuff that I missed, or things that I might not have caught up on the first time. So I would be excited to read it again, and I think that David would like it a lot too. With our book report card, nonfiction books are a little bit harder because we have, plot development and pacing and character development. Like, those things don't necessarily exist in a book like this. So I tried my best. But in looking at plot development and pacing, I got rid of the plot development and just looked at pacing, and I gave it 100 out of 100. Like, nothing feels too long. Everything moves and clips along. Obviously, there's more information you could have gotten from some stuff, but I think for the most part, it moves really, really well. Character development, there are no characters, but the way that the author was writing about the people and the places and the things of the 90s, the nouns of the 90s, works really well. 100 out of 100 for me. Theme and subject matter, obviously I was interested in reading it, so 100 out of 100. For writing style, I gave it a 95 out of 100, mostly because I like Klosterman's writing style. I also got to listen to him read the book, and the way he, speaks and the way he, reads it is great as well. So for reader engagement, I gave it a 90 out of 100. There were times where I put it down to do something else and then would come back to it, but I still got it read in a very short amount of time. So my final grade for the 90s is a 97 out of 100, which is an A, which is pretty impressive for me for a nonfiction book, right? Mm-hmm. So if you haven't read it, read it. My best friend, I texted him a photo of me reading this, and he was like, "Oh, I love Klosterman. I'm getting that from the library today." And so he and I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, but I'm excited to talk to him about it. And I've never read Chuck Klosterman before either, so I might pick up some other stuff now too, because he does write a lot about music, which was interesting. So my next one is one that you saw in our TBR video, because I was excited to read it, and that's The Leftovers by Tom Perrotta. I wanted to read this because I want to rewatch the series, which we need to start doing. So I wanted to read the book again, read the book before I watched the series again, and I loved this book. I love this book. I love the series. I love the writing. I love what it's saying. This book is essentially the first season of the show, and obviously they continue the story based on this for the second and third seasons. So I kind of knew what was happening, although there are definitely differences between the series and the book. The book is much more like low key and kind of relaxed, whereas the series feels much more like high key and like there's drama and mystery happening. And there is some of that here. There's like people trying to figure things out, but this just feels more like this is a book about grief. This is a book about what do you do when the people that you loved are now gone, and gone in a mysterious way, gone in some strange circumstances. It's a book about grief, which I found really, really interesting, and it's funny and it's sad and it's thrilling. I really loved it a lot. So for plot development and pacing, 100 out of 100, perfect. Character development, 95 out of 100. This is the lowest one I gave it because there are characters who I don't feel like are fully fleshed out, but they are background characters for a reason. So, yeah. Theme and subject matter, 100 out of 100. This book is great if you want to read something comical and lighthearted a little bit, but also that has some like heft to it. This is a good book for you, so 100 out of 100 for that. Writing style, 100 out of 100. I love Tom Perrotta's voice. I've loved it since I read, Election in high school. So, and then for reader engagement, I gave it 100 out of 100 as well. I read this one very fast, couldn't put it down, loved it, loved it, loved it. So that gives it a final grade of a 99 out of 100, which is an A+. So A+ for this one.
I had such high hopes for this next one. This was about, when did we find out that she was writing a book?
It was like
about
last summer, wasn't it?
It's almost a year ago. It was right before we actually went to Dollywood that we found out that Dolly Parton was teaming up with James Patterson to write a book. So I have been waiting for this to come out, and then it finally came out shortly before my birthday.
Well, and we got the ALC of the audiobook a month before it came out.
Yeah, but I didn't want to start that until I had the physical copy in my hand. So this was the first time where I actually listened to the audio reading at the same time, which was I had problems with. So we follow our main character, Annie Lee Keyes, as she hitchhikes all the way to Tennessee to start a music career. And along the way, we kind of uncover that she is probably not who she says she is. And along the way, she kind of bumps into characters such as the country diva herself, Ruth Anna Ryder, who is voiced in audio by the one and only Dolly Parton, and probably will star in the movie as well as this country diva. It reads like a James Patterson book. It's very fast. It really messes with you to where you have to keep reading until you're actually done, because he leaves each chapter off with a cliffhanger, which sometimes I enjoy, sometimes I do not, especially when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you want to go to sleep. So I think that's one of the big problems I have with his writing, but it also reads like a James Patterson book. While I was listening to the audiobook, what I found a big problem with was that a lot of the music, a lot of the songs in the book, in the audiobook, they do not sing the songs. They read it like it's poetry, which I found very odd. So it would just stop, and then you would hear like someone reading like a poem. It's like, oh, that's the song. So,
well, especially because there's a whole album of those songs. Like, why were those songs not included in the audiobook?
Yeah, you know? And I don't know if it was a rights issue or what, but that was just kind of took me out of it. So plot development and pacing was about an 85 out of 100. Character development, a 90. Theme and subject matter, a 90. Writing style, an 80. Reader engagement, 85. It's almost, well, like I said, it reads like a James Patterson book, so it feels like I have read this story before. There were some reveals later on in the book that I was kind of surprised by, because towards the end it gets really, really dark, which I was not expecting, so I kind of liked that a bit. But overall, I gave it an 86 out of 100. But I will say that I liked the album so much more than the book. So it was, I mean, I don't know if I would ever read this again, but I do.
You think I would like it?
I think you would probably like it. I think it's cute.
Mm-hmm.
It's cute until like the very end, and that gets really dark. And I'm like, well, why couldn't this have been the whole book?
Right.
So, but it does talk a little bit about, you know what I find odd? Sorry, tangent. She gets to Nashville, and she immediately becomes a success.
That doesn't happen.
It's like overnight. She sings at a bar, and all of a sudden someone videotapes her or records her, and she's immediately a star, which I'm like, I know that they had to do that for the book and for pacing wise, but I was like,
yeah, from a reality standpoint.
You know?
Yeah.
And then she gets this deal, and, you know, she's not who she says she is. And I'm like, well, how did they deal with, like, you know, payment? Or, like, don't they need to see that?
I mean,
when they're going to pay her, we need to see your, can we see your driver's license? And she's like, oh, I don't have one. Do you remember, like, in Showgirls, when she was like, can I get your social security number? She's like, let me get back to you. I'm like, how do you not know your social security number?
Right. I mean, it's a lot of, like, holes that you need.
This is the Nashville version of Showgirls without all the Showgirl stuff. That's what it reads like. Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
Okay. Maybe I would like it then.
But without all the Showgirl
stuff.
So
is the Dolly Parton character the Gina Gershon character?
Yes, but not so...
Not so sapphic.
Yeah.
My next one is, you've already seen me talk about this book. You just haven't seen me review it yet. And that is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This was not on my TBR. This was, I purchased 4 books, and this happened to be one of them. And I was basically almost done. I had one left and that I was almost done with. And so I purchased this. And then you saw the reading vlog. If you've seen that, well, I'll link it below. But if you haven't seen that, I read this book in a day. So I basically finished this in a 24-hour period, along with, doing a fair amount of other things around the house. But this book was great. And I said in the reading vlog that I think that maybe I'm going to try some space horror. And you'll see in our next video that I...
Tried.
I found some. And we'll talk about that in our next video. But so I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to talk too much about the book because I already have the whole vlog about it, so it's not really necessary. But for plot development and pacing, a 90 out of 100. There were definitely times where I felt like it could have moved a little bit faster, but I really liked the way it worked. For character development, 90 out of 100. There were some characters who I wanted more from, and some characters I wanted less from. So, that's just personal preference for me. Theme and subject matter, 90 out of 100. It's not really about anything. Does that make sense? Like, I guess you could say it's maybe about like childhood trauma and trying to overcome that and make it right. But it's just a good read. Like, I don't think you need to infer any other meaning onto it. Writing style, 100 out of 100. I really like this author and how she writes. I think it was great. In engagement, 95 out of 100. I read it in a day. Like, I got through it fast. I was engaged the whole time. I didn't want to put it down, so I really enjoyed it. And that gives it a final score of 93 out of 100, which is an A-.
Did you like it?
I did. I like this one a lot. And the other ones that I have purchased that this inspired, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about, so we'll see. My next one is the last one that was actually on my TBR, which is Olympus, Texas by Stacey Swan. This is a book that I read about, saw it, and then I was like, I think I want to read that. But it is so far outside my comfort zone. It is so far outside the things that I normally read. This is like contemporary fiction, no thrilling elements, no horror elements. The only thing about it that is typical to my reading stuff is like it is about mythology, or it involves mythology in a way. This is basically the story of Zeus and Hera and their children. It's a retelling of the Achilles and Artemis story, essentially, which was actually really interesting. And once I kind of was able to discern some of that information, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And this story is really about the small town and all the things that this family has endured and how they change and shift over the years. And my friend Ryan basically said to me that it is like if Tennessee Williams wrote an episode of Dynasty. So, if that says anything to you.
Two of my greatest loves.
Yeah. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's as campy as like a Dallas or a Dynasty necessarily, but it does have some of those like over the top elements, and I loved it, and I think you would actually really love it too. Mm-hmm. So for plot development and pacing, 100 out of 100. There's not a lot that happens. Like, there's one big central thing that happens and a lot of smaller things that ripple out from there, but it keeps moving, and it's so good. Character development was 95 out of 100. I liked almost all of these people. Like, there's not a single person here that I think that you would walk away from disliking. So, theme and subject matter is the lowest, 90 out of 100. I love the mythology retelling. I love that so much. There are some other things that I wish that we would have explored more, but in the course of the book, I don't think you could have really. Writing style, 100 out of 100. I will read Stacey Swan again, depending on what it's about, but I will read her again. And then 95 out of 100 for reader engagement, because I was into this book almost the entire time. So there were only a couple of times where I was like, maybe I'll read something else. So, and it's why I read Dead Silence before I finished this, because I had a moment where I put it down. So that gives it a final score of 96 out of 100, which is an A.
That I completely forgot that I read this book, which tells you quite a lot. That is Alex Finlay's The Night Shift. Now, I remember being very excited by this. It's a massacre happens at a Blockbuster, and one survivor is she lives, and then years later it happens again. So this survivor and this
at
other
a Blockbuster
at a Blockbuster.
It happens again.
No, it's like an ice cream shop.
Oh, okay.
Later.
Okay, I was like,
I wish. So it's about close to 20 years later where it happens again. So these two survivors kind of band together to figure out who is doing this. And I was excited by that because it kind of gave me slasher element vibes. I don't like that word, but it did when I first read about it. So I was really excited to get it. It reads like James Patterson light.
Oh.
That's not in a bad way, but it's just, if you like that, you're going to get that. But I was expecting a different book. I was expecting like a slasher book, and that's not what I got. But it reads like James Patterson. Like I said before, the chapters go by very, very fast, and it keeps you wanting to read it until you're finished. So for plot development and pacing, it was a 90 out of 100. Character development, 85. With character development, it didn't seem like they were fleshed out so much for me. It just seemed like they were just these generic characters that we always read about. And I don't think you would like it because it reads very much like a crime novel.
I'm out.
Or like a detective novel. Theme and subject matter was an 80. I got really excited by the whole Blockbuster Video thing because I used to work at Blockbuster Video. So that made me extremely happy, but we're only there for a moment. Writing style, 90. Reader engagement was a 90. It was like, okay, I have to finish this. I might as well just finish it all today.
Yeah.
And it was something that once reading it, I just didn't look forward to. So overall, I gave it an 87 out of 100. I think you would still probably, I don't think you would like it, but I think you would probably.
I could read it without DNFing it.
Yeah, but I just think once it starts to get into like a detective novel, I'm like, I was kind of out.
That's the one thing about thrillers that I find the most obnoxious. It's like there are so many thrillers that do it well, that do this like the investigation part of a crime well, and then there's so many thrillers that just focus on the detective, and that is so boring to me. Yeah. Like I don't know what it is.
And the two female protagonists are great. I just wish we would stick around with them a little bit more. So my last book was Sarah Ruhl's Smile, the Story of a Face. Sarah Ruhl is a favorite playwright of ours, of both me and Craig's. And it just talks about how she came down with Bell's palsy right after the birth of her twins and her journey kind of through that. It's not a cozy read by any means, and it talks about kind of like how important our face is when we step outside, with our friends, with our family, with our children, and how we kind of forget those elements of, this says a lot about who you are, but when you lose that, what happens, and how do people look at you, and how do people kind of deal with you on a daily basis. So it was just a very sad journey, but it's also her coming to grips with this may be what I'm going to be like for the rest of my life. So how do I learn to deal with that, and how do I make that a part of my life? And it kind of happened during this time. She had a play. It was the In the Next Room, or the Vibrator plays, that kind of was coming out. So she was getting ready to have this big play produced on Broadway when this happens. Right when she was about to get so much publicity, this happens to her, and kind of like what she kind of went through in that, because she talks about how she's getting photographed and she's not smiling, and how people are calling her aloof or standoffish because of that. And really, it was because of something else. But that whole journey of hers was really just interesting to read, especially if you don't know anything about Bell's palsy and what it kind of does to a person and kind of does to their life. It was a very interesting read. And just her writing in general is very terse and very poetic, even in her nonfiction books. So plot development and pacing. The pacing was really, it was not something that you could race right through. You had to kind of sit with it. So I gave that a 90 out of 100. Character development, it was a 90. Theme and subject matter, 100. Writing style was perfect at 100. And reader engagement was 90. So overall, 94 out of 100. I don't know if you would enjoy it.
Probably not. I've read some of her non-fiction-y stuff, and I'm much more a fan of her work as a playwright than I am of her kind of
it's a very tough read, and I think if you think, because she talks a lot about the people in her life, in her core inner circle, her children and her husband. How can she show the love to her children if she can't smile? What does that do with her and her husband's sex life if she can't smile or show any kind of, ecstasy or happiness? So it just talked about a lot of stuff that I had never thought about before, especially, if you're in a marriage, if you have a family, what that kind of does. Because it doesn't just affect you, it affects everybody else around you as well.
Yeah. My last two. This next one I don't have because I've already returned it. That should tell you enough about it. Though this is the one I was telling you about when I graded it. I looked at the grade and I was like, I think it should be lower than this. So did I do something wrong? But then I rechecked my grading and I was like, nah, this is probably accurate. My next one is, I'll put a picture of it right here, is Beneath the Stairs by Jennifer Fawcett. And this is a debut horror thriller novel. And it was fine. This is one of the ones that I added on when I purchased a bunch of books. It was in my big group that I purchased. So I was anticipating it because the cover is beautiful and moody and scary, and then the premise is really interesting, that there's this house in the woods, and I think it's upstate New York, and it is called the Octagon House, and this terrible murder happened there, and these kids in the 90s are drawn to it and want to go into it, and then some things happen to them when they're there, and then fast forward 25 years, they're now adults who are still living with some of the stuff that happened to them there, and the whole book is speculative about what's going on. You don't know what's going on or what happened in that house. You don't know if it's a ghost story or if there's actually a murderer, or you have no idea what it is, just no clue, and then it is kind of explained at the end. It's kind of explained. I still don't know that I can fathom what truly happened. It's why I returned the book. I read it in a day. I read it fast. And I was like, I'm never reading this again, and I don't think that he will like it, and I don't think that he'll ever pick it up. So I was like, bye book. So I sent it on its way. And yeah, it is not memorable to me really at all. I don't remember too much about it. It could be how fast I read it, but I also think that it's just, I don't think it was well structured, and I don't think that the meat of it was actually that important. You know what I mean? So for plot development and pacing, I gave it an 80 out of 100. It does move well. It does go back and forth between time periods, which we all know I don't like that much. So that's a problem. Character development, 80. There's a woman in a coma, and she is the most likable person in the book. That should tell you something. I just didn't like anybody. There was no one that was really that compelling. There was a character towards the end, the brother of the woman in a coma, and I liked him a lot. He was great and well written, and I was kind of oh, he's so sweet and nice and kind, but one of the only people that I actually ended up liking. Theme and subject matter is a 75 out of 100. In reality, it probably should have been a 50 because I don't really know what she's trying to talk about. Again, I'm inferring that it's about childhood trauma in some way, but I don't know. Writing style, 85 out of 100. She's a great writer. I just don't think that the book is well done. And then engagement, 80 out of 100. I did read it quickly, but I could have put it down anytime and not cared and moved on to something else. So that gives it a final score of an 80 out of 100, which is a B-, my lowest score of the month. So yeah, but a B- doesn't even feel that bad. If I gave a student a B-, I'd be like, it's fine. It's fine.
I don't even remember you reading that.
That's because I read it so quickly. Yeah. Oh, also you were gone when I read it. Yeah, you weren't here. My last one is one that I got in our book haul, which you probably saw. And I was like, I finished Beneath the Stairs, and I was like, oh, I have a week left. Let me read another book. And he was out of town. And so I started Janice Hallett's The Appeal, which people have been talking about. And when I saw it at the bookstore, I was like, well, this is interesting. And I think people are mostly talking about the format of this book, because the book is all written in emails and text messages. So you're getting a story parsed out through different people's opinions of what's been happening, and so You're getting a view of the events of this story through people's various opinions on what they have seen and experienced themselves. And it's about these two lawyers who are retrying a case of a person who has been murdered, and they are to go back through and like review all of this documentation around these people that were all involved. So it is essentially about this small town in England, and it is about this like amateur drama group, and they are producing Arthur Miller's All My Sons. And then this new woman and her husband moved to town. They've just been aid workers in Africa, and they are brought into the group basically to like meet people. And then one of the characters, you find out that his granddaughter has a rare form of cancer and needs experimental treatment. So there's this appeal that is done to raise money for this little girl. And the situations kind of start to escalate, like, is this appeal real? Does she really have cancer? What is going on? Like, what's happening? And then the actual appeal of the novel is the appeal part. The other appeal part is that someone has been tried for the murder of this individual, and they don't know if they are actually guilty or not. And so that's why they're reviewing all of this material. I will say, I was surprised by this. I was surprised that I enjoyed it. I was surprised that I got through it as quickly as I got through it. And I was surprised that the format actually worked. Like, really? Yeah. Because at first I was like, well, this is going to be really annoying. Like, this is going to be obnoxious to read through this. Mm-hmm. But you really are getting little, like, breadcrumbs the entire time, right? And then all these breadcrumbs start to, like, congeal together, and you're like, oh, okay. And then, like, you think it's one person who might have done it because at the beginning there's a murder. Somebody is dead. And also there's one character that they talk about through the entire beginning of the book who you never hear from them. You never see an email from them at all. It's all just people talking about them. So I was able to figure out who got murdered really quickly, but the person who did it, why they did it, that takes a while to get parsed out, and I think that was great. The other good part about this is that I listened to the audiobook as well. Who's surprised? Anyone? No. But the audiobook had like 4 or 5 different actors reading all of these different characters, and so you have different voices, you have different intonations, different accents even for many of these characters, and that helps a lot. The one downside to the audiobook is that every section is like an email, right? And so the audiobook narrators will read from, subject, date, to. Like, they read all of that and the time. And I'm like, you wasted so much time of this audiobook reading that. But I also know that people don't do what I'm doing. Typically, they don't read the physical book while doing that. So I thought it was great. I really thought it was great. And I would be interested in reading more books that, like, use this format because I think it was really nice and well done. So for plot development and pacing, 90 out of 100. Again, I think that there were some issues with the format, but the pacing was really nice. Character development, 90 out of 100. There were some characters who you really get to know well, and others you don't, which I wanted to know more about. I wanted to know more about the victim, and I don't feel like I knew that much about them. Theme and subject matter, 95 out of 100. Love this, like, small town drama. I think it's great. Writing style was 90 out of 100. Again, it's emails and text messages. Like, there's not really any style to it, but the style itself was actually pretty, successful. And then engagement, I gave it a 90 out of 100. I think for the first, like, 100 pages, I was almost ready to put it down because I was like, this format's too hard. But then once you kind of get through that, it's great. So that gives it a final score of a 91 out of 100, which is an A- for me. Read it. I think you should read it.
Isn't there always drama around a community theater in a small town?
Well, and it's like the theater part of it is actually, like, very much a backdrop, and it's more the appeal to raise money for this little girl and how this community kind of bands together, and then what these, like, interpersonal dramas are between them, because this all takes place leading up to a production. And so, like, the 75% of the way through the book, you finally get to the production, and then the end of it is, like, a rehash of old stuff that you haven't, old information that you haven't seen yet. So
Does Arthur Miller show up?
no, he's dead.
What percentage would you give your TBR for March?
I mean, the actual TBR that I chose, I was happy with. I read all of those books and I liked them. The added books that I added on, there's only one I didn't like. If I look at all of these, I'm like, these are all pretty good books. Like, and also that I read all of those in a month. That's crazy to me. So I was really happy with my TBR this month.
I was really happy with one. The Old Woman with the Knife is probably one I would reread again. The Sarah Rule book, I would probably get back into it in a few years. But yeah,
it'd be a good one to revisit. I kind of want David to read all of these. I think the only one that you're probably not going to like of these might be Hex.
Why?
I think you'll have the same issues with it that I had, I think. So I would be excited for him to read all of these, I think.
Great.
So, yeah, that's pretty impressive for us. I mean...
For you.
Well, for me. I don't expect this ever again. I mean, maybe not until the summer. Like,
well, you were probably making up for September and October.
Yeah, I was doing some math the other night when I was like looking at other people's reading challenges on Storygraph, and people were like, "I want to read 100 books in a year." So then I was trying to do the math, and I was like, "Okay, that's basically 8.3 books a month to get to 100 books a year," and I'm like, "This reading 8 books in a month is rare." And so I'm like, I can't do this every month. I can't read this many books every month. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we're already into April and I've not finished one book. So, I don't know how people do that. I don't know how people read that many books in a month, but my goal is to use the summer to like add in those extra 4 books a month that I might not get in. So if I can double up on the summertime, then maybe I'll be able to get to 100 by the end of the year. So
we should do a 2-week horror-thon and see how many horror books we can get through in 2 weeks.
2 weeks over the summer.
That'd be fun.
I would love that. It's a great idea. Well, that's our wrap up. Sorry it's so long. I read so many books, so I apologize. I'll try to shorten that up a little bit, but
I will try to read less.
Read less? Read more.
No.
You only read 4.
No.
But we're glad you came back. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back to our channel. We are Shelf-Possessed.
I am Elton John.
And I'm David Furnish.
I'm David.
And I'm Craig. Thanks for coming back again. Check out our Instagram.
At @shelf_possessed.
And if I haven't sold you enough on Storygraph at this point yet, check it out below. Check out my link. You can check out my profile and then join. And then add me as a friend so we can follow each other and see what each others are reading.
I will
see what each other
eventually do that.
We'll get him on there. Yeah.
Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow.
I'm still trying to I'm going to get him to download Book Player so that I can share audiobooks with him. So like the video. Comment down below. What did you think of our grades? What did you think of our books? And we're excited to see you again. So come back for the next one and we'll see you very, very soon.
Goodbye.